I am extremely happy that this fantastic team of individuals from all over Europe are here. And this is the first time in our 5 years long history that a program will run in English. But hopefully there will be more. So this house is, how to say, this house has two parts. The part one, where we sit here, is the oldest building of the city. Used to be a Catholic church, then later a Protestant church, back to the 13th century, by the way, and later become a synagogue until 1944, May 16, when the approximately 180 local Jewish people were deported, including my parents. Here we organize cultural events like this one. 2 days ago we had a book reading program on the artificial intelligence. And in the other part, in the modern part, there are the 3 digital exhibitions on the Jewish scientists, the Jewish artists, and the Jewish sportmen. So everybody is welcome to see also the exhibition. You tried already. And I have no other task than to give the microphone.
Yeah, I have my microphone.
You have?
Yes, but to get my colleague Gabor, who is going to...
Gabor.
So, Tikest, I'm Gabor Stein, the vice leader of the Translator House, which is seated here in the city in Balatonfüred. And first of all, I would like to say a thank you for you, Ferry, that we could bring our program to your house, and it is for us a great opportunity, because I think that the Translators House was a little bit isolated in the city, which was our forward, and now it's a great opportunity to bring us in the scene of the city. The main occupation of the Translators House is that's Hungarian literature, contemporary and classical literature. Will be translated into several languages, in English, in Spain, and into little languages. But this program is quite different than our main occupation, because we have invited several poets from different countries of Europe, and they lived here since almost two weeks, and they are, I think, a fantastic group, and they become friends, and now it's a great pleasure to show them and to hear them about Europe and about their work, about their vision about our continent and about their countries. So, András, you will bring us the program. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I am András Imre. I am part of the team who organized this project. This project is a part of Veszprém European Cultural Capital. And as Gabor already said, we invited 6 outstanding European poets from all over Europe. They are going to introduce themselves. We are we have been having lots of programs. We have visited high schools. In Balatonfüred we visited Lóci, and in Balatonalmádi we visited kéttannyelvű, and in Veszprém we visited Lovasi and Vetési, and our guests had classes and they were really popular. Some of them were invited back to the school already. We also had a program in Veszprém University. And apart from these types of programs, we had some excursions in the region to make our guests know the region, about how Bakony, Balaton, Felvidék, and Veszprém. And also, well, we were having fun in the house. Talks were taking place, of course, and we also asked them to write a poem while they are here. I have already seen some quite interesting ones, and also we produced picture postcards, which you were invited to get off because they have their the poems there, one poem from each poet and the translation. We translated their poems, several of them, and there is a paper going around, and if somebody is interested in the homepage, please make sure to copy it, and you can check the broader context of our program. It was really interesting to hear very different languages in the house. English was going on, and at the same time French, and sometimes Spanish, German, and even some words Estonian. The interesting thing we found out that it's not only Veszprém was this year's cultural capital, but by pure coincidence, we invited a poet who was born in Esch, in Luxembourg, which was last year's cultural capital of Europe, and one from Tartu, Estonia, which is going to be next year's cultural capital of Europe, one of them. I'm already speaking too much. This is a good team. They know how to organize themselves, so I'm not going to speak anymore, I guess. They are going to tell a little bit about themselves, about their identities, and how they see what is going on in Europe. So please, Guy.
So hello everybody, my name is Guy Helminger. What Andras didn't mention, yesterday we had wine tasting, that was excellent. I loved it. As he already said, I'm from Luxembourg and I live in Germany. I moved to Germany in the 80s because in those days Luxembourg, it's so small it hadn't had a university. Nowadays it has one, but in those days not. I think it's quite interesting to say something about my country, to introduce myself, and on the same speak about Europe, because we have about 650,000 inhabitants, which is quite small, a little bit more than 500,000. And half of them are foreigners. They don't have the Luxembourgish citizenship. And the country wouldn't work anymore without them. You have whole branches of work, like in medicine or in a lot of other cases, that we don't have enough people just to do this job. So it's absolutely necessary, this mixture. And as it was always such a small country, we were forced always to learn languages, which I think is a very, very good thing. So going to school, I had to learn German and French and English and Spanish, because otherwise it would be quite difficult in my own country to speak to people. Nowadays, for example, if you go and buy bread, you could, with a very high possibility, find someone who speaks French to you, yeah, and is not able to speak Luxembourgish. And in Luxembourg, this is not a problem, and I think this is quite European. So it's more important to live together with other people than having the same passport. And this is something that I really like in Luxembourg. On the other hand, I had to move in those days, and I was influenced by German literature, so I started to write in German, and I studied German literature and philosophy in Germany. I met my wife there, so I stayed there. Although Luxembourg's changed a lot. And what is also quite interesting is, to these 650,000 people living there, every day about 150,000 people coming in to work there and leaving in the evening again. They working, yeah, in hospitals, but also, of course, in institutions of the European Union, which brings the really strange case that during the day you hear, the language you hear most is French or English. And in the evening, it gets back to Luxembourgish. So it changes, like, you know. And concerning literature, it's also, you're talking about Luxembourgish literature, then you're talking about people who write in Luxembourgish, but also in German, in French, in English. So I myself belong to the Luxembourgish literature, but nevertheless to the German-spoken literature. And if you're interested about the language itself, Luxembourgish, you might know about, I don't know the name in English, Siebenbürgen. This is in Romania, and yeah, and they speak more or less the same.
Brașov. Brașov is the name of the city. Siebenbürgen is Brașov in Hungarian.
Yeah, Sibiu, we say for...
Sibiu is Nagyszeben.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So if I meet people from there, I just can talk to them like that, which is quite interesting. Yeah, I write in different genres, like poetry, novels, and plays. And for the moment, even one of the plays being translated and will be shown in Sibiu. One, I don't know when, but so that's for my part to start. Now you know who I am.
Hello, I'm Jan Malin, and country which the inhabitants, there are 2 times as much as in Luxembourg. It means 1.3 million. And I'm from the second biggest city, from Tartu, as Andras said. And for me, very important is that I live in my native language. I guess it seems that it turns important, more and more important in every year that goes on. I guess you know that Estonians and Hungarians are language relatives. Although we don't understand our languages too much, but the scientists somehow say, I don't understand why, but they say that we are relatives. I have published about 10 books since now, but the last one was published in 2015, and after that I haven't written very much, but performed. and also here in Balatonfjord and in this region I have mostly performed. And but this place is also very, very happy for me because after 7 or so years I wrote here something. But that means that, of course, the country is important, but also very much the colleagues with whom I have been here. Thank you. Thank you. And it's very nice to walk not only in Balatonfjord but also in this region. We walk together with Yvonne, for example, and also in many trips we had. It was great. Thanks.
I forgot to mention in the beginning that we don't want this to be a very formal conversation. So if anybody has any question during, just indicate and ask, because we really want to have a kind of a dialogue. So I grabbed the opportunity and asked Jan if they understand each other better with the Finns.
Yes. Much better.
Longer answer.
Much better. But rather often Finnish words are, they sound very similar, but they have absolutely different meaning, the words. And therefore, sometimes it's dangerous to speak like Finnish, but in fact you express something absolutely wrong.
Okay. Gérard.
Good evening. I'm Gérard Cartier. I'm coming from France. And as my English is very poor, I would prefer, if possible, to speak in French. If somebody is able to translate, I imagine it is possible.
It is possible. Melinda doesn't want to translate. No, I'm not going to translate, please. Translate Gérard's. You.
Est-ce que... Pardon. Donc je crois être le plus âgé de notre groupe, puisque je suis né juste après la guerre, et je crois que je suis peut-être le représentant d'une pensée ou d'un sentiment vis-à-vis de l'Europe qui a beaucoup évolué par la suite.
Azt hiszem, hogy én vagyok a legidősebb, mivel Mit csinálj? Hangosabban? Jó, azt hiszem, hogy én vagyok a legidősebb, mondta Gérard az összes résztvevő közül, hiszen pont a háború után születtem, és többen beszélnek franciául, de próbálom azért, hogy tehát, hogy az Európa gondolat, ami a háború után volt, az nagyon sokat változott.
Donc je suis né à Grenoble, qui est la capitale des Alpes françaises, qui est une région dans laquelle il y a eu des combats entre les nazis et la résistance extrêmement durs et qui se sont terminés par un massacre.
Grenoble-ban születtem, az Alpok fővárosában, és nagyon világháborúban nagyon sok áldozata volt az ottani harcoknak.
Si bien que dans cette région, tout le monde, à cette époque, avait dans sa mémoire, dans ses sentiments, un lien avec la résistance, quelques-uns avec la collaboration, mais la plupart avec la résistance, et ça les a marqués, je crois, à vie.
És ezért a legtöbben ebben a régióban, tehát néhányan nyilván a kollaboránsokkal szimpatizáltak, de legtöbben az ellenállókkal szimpatizáltak, akiket ez egy életre meghatározott.
Bon, par exemple, dans ma famille, j'ai un oncle qui a été fusillé, plusieurs oncles qui ont été dans le maquis. Et lorsque j'ai commencé à écrire de la poésie, je ne voulais pas parler de moi, je voulais parler d'autre chose. Et tout naturellement, j'ai parlé de la résistance et de cette époque.
És az én nagybátyját is kivégezték, és amikor elkezdett írni, akkor nem saját magáról akart írni, hanem erről a korszakról.
Je crois que tous les écrivains ont quelques thèmes, peu nombreux, qui les poursuivent toute leur vie. Et certainement, ce thème de la Seconde Guerre mondiale est l'un de ceux qui m'ont poursuivi, puisque j'ai commencé à écrire de la poésie en parlant de la résistance dans le Vercors, dans la région où je suis né. Et mon dernier livre, un gros roman de 500 pages, parle aussi beaucoup de la résistance.
Minden írónak megvan az a téma, ami őt üldözi, és ez a második világháború Gérard témája. Az első könyvében is a verkori ellenállásról ír, és az utolsóban is erről ír.
Donc si on se replace à l'époque qui suit la guerre, disons les 20 ou 25 ans qui suivent la guerre, à ce moment-là, l'Europe était une notion essentiellement économique. Le sentiment de l'Europe, d'appartenance à une communauté européenne, n'était pas, je crois, partagé intimement, en tout cas en France.
A világháború után 25 évben ez egy gazdasági, de az európai identitás, az Európához való tartozás az nem volt egyértelmű, és inkább egy gazdasági oldalról fogták föl sokan.
Il se trouve qu'à côté d'être poète, je suis aussi ingénieur, ou plutôt je suis ingénieur et à côté poète, et j'ai travaillé sur beaucoup de grands projets européens.
A helyzet Gérardral az, hogy ő azon kívül, hogy költő, mérnök is, pontosabban mérnök, aki verseket ír, és több nagy európai projekten dolgozott.
Par exemple, le tunnel sous la Manche. Donc j'ai travaillé 8 ans sur cet ouvrage, vivant d'ailleurs plusieurs années en Angleterre. Et dans la dernière période de mon travail d'ingénieur, j'ai travaillé sur un tunnel entre la France et l'Italie, et donc travaillant de façon étroite avec les Italiens.
8 évig dolgozott a La Manche csatorna alatti csalagút megépítésén, és az utolsó időben pedig a Franciaország és Olaszország között egy alagúton, tehát az olaszokkal együttműködve.
Et donc c'est des ouvrages qui sont immenses, mais qu'on ne pourrait pas imaginer dans un cadre autre que l'Europe pacifique qui a été construite depuis 70 ans. Donc je porte en fait en moi une sorte de contradiction entre le point d'où je viens et là où nous en sommes aujourd'hui.
Ezeket a projekteket nem lehetett volna más kontextusban, mint egy európai együttműködéssel megvalósítani, és Gérard érez magában valamiféle ellentmondást azok között, hogy ahonnan jön, és ahol most vagyunk.
Bon, je crois que ça suffit.
Okay, I'm Yvonne Reddick, I'm from the UK, so it falls to me to make the Brexit joke. As you will know, a few years ago, over 50% of my compatriots failed an IQ test. Seriously though, I remember the day after the referendum, I was living with an Irish flatmate in this tiny town in the northwest of England, and we got up and we sort of looked at each other and went, what just happened? What are we doing? I was due to go for a coffee the day after the referendum with a Polish colleague of mine who had come over on a very substantial European Research Council grant. She had brought a load of money into the university. She is a very valued colleague. She still works with us. And I was sitting there in front of her just going, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's really interesting hearing these different perspectives about Europe. I can distinctly remember the perspective of my father and his views. Had he lived to witness the Brexit referendum, he would have voted to leave on the grounds of sovereignty. My mother, on the other hand, is an ardent Remainer. She shifted the political party that she'd voted for her entire life to vote against Brexit. So she changed the habits of 40 years. It really did polarize our family a little bit. My grandmother was French-speaking Swiss. My mother is half Swiss. You know, occasionally, if I want to think about that side of my heritage in a poem, I will use French vocabulary. One that I will read for you a little bit later has the rallying cry of the anti-Brexit movement, which is "Je suis européenne" in French. It's not in English. I was born in Scotland, and that's quite an interesting perspective to have, really, now that you have Scottish politicians saying, okay, let's leave the UK and rejoin the EU. So there's all sorts of uncertainty happening for us at the moment, I think. And I'm interested in this perspective that Gérard has brought up, that the European Union was conceived as an economic project. For somebody like my father, yes, it had that kind of value, but it would have seemed practical and utilitarian. For somebody more of my generation, it feels like a cultural network. It feels like a shared identity between diverse nations. Europe now reminds me of a slightly peculiar family, more than it ever did. So a few generations ago, we were at war with each other. We were fighting all the time. Nobody could agree on anything. Right now, it's more, oh, they've moved to a different village. What are they doing? Oh, when are they coming back? Oh, I don't know. That's a bit strange. I don't like the way, you know, what my grandmother would have said to me if I used my knife and fork wrongly, you know, bad manners rather than really serious disagreements. We're related. We live in the same geographical area. It's in our best interests to try to get on. And I think this question of identity is very, very interesting for me, because meeting these wonderful friends of mine this week, I've been struck by how much we have in common, way beyond poetry. We have had a wonderful time together, and it's been really marvelous.
Hello, my name is Antonio Rivero Taravillo. I'm from Sabadell in the south of Spain, but actually I was born in another part of Spain, which is actually in the north of Africa. Spain has two cities, north of Morocco in the southern shore of the Mediterranean, and those are Ceuta and Melilla. I was born in Melilla, and it's a Spanish town, as I said. So geography and history are quite funny and strange things, because, for example, the United Kingdom used to be the European Union until 1 or 2 years ago, those cities belong to the European Union and they are in the north of Africa. I'm happy to say I'm an African person myself. It sounds quite interesting. But I am European and Spanish, of course, too. We at Spain have a very close relationship, of course, with another family of countries, which is the Spanish America, from Mexico to Chile and Argentina. My mother was born in Mexico City of Spanish parents. They moved there in 1917. Those were very violent times in Mexico because those were the times of the revolution, Pancho Villa, Zapata, etc. So after my mother died in 1925, they came back to Spain. Probably because I was born in Africa, I've always developed an interest in Atlantic cultures, and I don't know why, but I started studying a very, very, very strange European language, not much spoken, Irish, and then I started translating Irish literature in Irish, not in English, about 30 years ago. It's a language which belongs to the Celtic family of languages. There are two branches. One of them is the so-called Goidelic, which includes Scottish Gaelic, Irish, and Manx, the language spoken in the Isle of Man. And the other one is the family, the branch, which includes Welsh, Cornish in Cornwall, and then Breton in France. I think that a poet or someone who is interested in languages, in literature, thinks or believes that richness is good, and the more languages you understand or read or think about them, the better, because they expand your experience. And that's one of the reasons I've been so happy here, sharing the time with these colleagues, including the Hungarian ones. I don't speak any Hungarian, of course, but I'm curious about science and everything I read. For example, when András translated my poems, I took some time to read them in Hungarian. I understood not a single word, but I noticed how he had changed a few two lines, and they improved in his translation because he made a change. We'll see it later because it's in the poem here. So to finish, I wanted to tell you that I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Translators Association. It's been a wonderful job, and thank you.
Hello. If I am today in such place, I want to start with greeting in Yiddish. Good Abend, Taire Haverim. And I want, as colleagues started from their roots, I want to start with joke. From my father's side, in family, the native language of my grandma was Yiddish. The native language of my father was Lithuanian. My native language was Russian, and now I am Ukrainian poet and translator who works only in Ukrainian. And all we understand that identity, with which changed after two world wars in 20th century. And I have different roots, Jewish, Russian, Ukrainian, Polish, perhaps we don't know, Turkish, Greek or Gypsy. No, in my family, different parts had very deep connection with our ground, And if you know, I am from country where it's now apocalypse in progress, and our today news that after night Russian rocket attack, we have today very for us it's very big civilian tragedy in Uman. Uman is Jewish city where Hasid Jewish celebrate Rosh Hashanah every year, and during a full-scale war too. And even in pandemia, they passed over our bodies and legal ways, not. And now, if I know from youth, we have 22 died, killed people, among them three children. And I know that many people are under broken walls of their apartments and buildings, and how what I say connect with identity, because our war is war for identity. Because Putin in July 2021 have a pseudo-historical speech about the Ukrainians and Russians are the same people, but it's not true. And historically, and how we feel now today, people with different roots, our war is about identity, about that we have many, we have black humor and have many jokes about, it's better to be killed than to be Russian. Sorry. And it's better to live with blackouts, but without Russians. And it's, if you know, it's like in Jewish tradition, Jewish humor, it's a way to survive. And but I want to know, as for me, Europe, I have a different vision of what is Europe. Europe for me is my country now, because as say, people in many countries where, like, I don't know, in US Congress, many people, congressmen, said that we talk only about what you struggle about. I'm so sorry for my mistakes. And this situation, if you know, we have Nobel laureate for peace, Alexandra Matviichuk. And she says very often, and I agree with her, that this situation is not only Ukrainian problem, because many convenience agreements, rules, after what we have, all Europe have after Second World War, stops to work in many branches. And this situation is about, we all people in Europe, because it's the center of Christian civilization, need to find new ways how we will be live after, and if you understand, this is not war between Russia and Ukraine, this is war between democracy and authoritarianism, because what was the Soviet Union win many years ago? Soviet Union and Nazis had not much differences. The Soviet Union was a very, very terrible country with camps, lagers, gulag, and many similar things. And if now Ukrainian lost his chance to win, I think it's not very good news for Europe and future. But no, I understand that it's my I don't know, my main thing today, and many people have opportunity don't to think about this, but I will be happy if they start to think about this in different ways.
One of my experiments during these 2 weeks was that talking with Iya, she, in the beginning, she mentioned the war several times, and she mentioned many years ago. So what she was talking about was about many years ago. And I didn't really understand what she was talking about because, and then later I found out that for me, and I think most of us Hungarians and most of us Europeans, the war started in 2022. And she was talking about years earlier, because for Ukrainians, the war started in 2014, which is logical. That's when parts of Ukraine were already occupied by the Russians. And I was really thinking about that, and for me it's like the 2 stages of war are comparable to the ways the English counted the floors for them. What is first floor for them, it's already second floor for us, because they have a ground floor. So I had this feeling that we are counting in different terms. And I would like to ask everybody else here what your feelings and opinions are about Ukraine, the current situation, the current war.
My opinion is here.
Well, I think supporting Ukraine is one thing, and I would do that too, but that's not everything. I mean, we have to think about how it will go on. You know, what is the aim? Where will it end? You know, just supporting is a good thing. No, but the war is going on, and we have to think about what will be the end. You know, can Ukraine win the war is a question. How long will the NATO support Ukraine? It's a question. Will there be the war spread in other countries? And so on and so on. I think just supporting it, I think if somebody like Putin, you know, was trying to run over the country, of course you support Ukraine. But nevertheless, it has to be a future will come, and I have to think about what will come, you know, and what we could do for it, you know, because it's just supporting us. Yeah, it sounds good. But I think it's not enough. We have to think in which direction it goes.
I guess, for example, my support of course, this is the sign of it. But it doesn't. It isn't all of my support. I guess it's, of course, it's important. This what is via NATO and governments and so on. But the most important, I guess, is that I have tried to support those persons who have been in contact with concrete Ukrainian people, and the Ukrainians have told their needs, and those concrete people in Estonia gather things and take them. And I'll support these concrete measures. And I guess it's the best way for me and for the most important for Ukraine.
Yeah, but I would like to know, for example, what do you think, where does it go?
Typical German questions, I'm sorry. No, if I say no, I don't know. It's Ukrainian feels now like Jewish in 1941, but with weapons. And I can't say because part of my family was killed in Holocaust, and part of my family was died in Holodomor, which was organized by Stalin. I don't know blockade, economical blockade, true with sanctions, because I read reportage about how Russia transport in sea, not on something country's territory with neft. I don't remember, oil. Okay, and something, and no, because support. It's interesting question. It's like in Christianity was question of Peter. If I remember correctly, then Peter met Jesus, and Jesus and Peter asked Jesus, "Where are you coming? Come again." I don't remember how it later. And Jesus answered that I am going to cross against you. And we have problem with people resources. And what I can to say you, go to be a soldier of Ukrainian army. We don't know what we can do with this. We have really problems with people resources because we have our population is less. Many people among men are not in Ukraine, and before 2022 they work like migrant workers. I don't have question. We haven't hope that it's only Putin person. We understand which is regime of I don't know how to English чекисты. Like Yezhov, like KGB, okay, KGB regime, and we don't know with not support with like force in all spheres of life where you can vote for this, because it's like it's like war with insects. I'm sorry. Sometimes when you do with something with insects at your home, they come. When you do with insects again, they come back with insects. Tarakane, I don't know, targans, and again and again. If historians say many wars have these rules, that war is going for years. because and now I see that many people are not interested in Ukrainian situation like before, and I feel it because no, I don't know. I have answer. I'm not political.
Okay.
I don't know. But no, I have many questions for Europe, for nationality states. From the one hand, it's cool that you can be yourself, you can save your identity, but with political of national states, it's like it's not our business now. Problems is about Ukrainians. No, and what we can to do with this, I don't know.
Thanks a lot for all these views on Europe. I wanted to come back a little bit on Europe as a whole, including also Ukraine, which I consider an integral part of Europe. I was wondering, I mean, my take was that for all of you, this idea of united in diversity that worked very well for the past decades. And I was wondering, when reflecting over the title of this conference, Europe is loud again, is it for you more that Europe is there as the shining idea which should guide us and then things will turn to the better, or is it more a warning for you? Europe is full of troubles. We have war, we have Brexit, we have debates, we have problems with the core values. Half of the European Union is in debate with, for instance, my home country on the core values, all of those who are sitting here. So I'm wondering, is it more a warning for you that we have to watch out, that we don't end up as the UK with a lose-lose situation, or are you more on the optimistic side? That's my short question.
At least I am very optimistic because I'm sure that if there are problems, that means that this that has problems is alive, and therefore it's very nice we have problems.
Well, I wouldn't call it the shining star, but nevertheless, I wouldn't also say because of problems we have to deny it. I mean, this one extreme and that's the other one. If people are together, they start to discuss and they have not the same opinion. And you have that in the European Union too. That is a thing that doesn't make me any panic or whatever, not at all. It's quite a different thing because you were mentioning now your country. If you start, of course, to go against rules that apparently in the European Union everybody agreed, you know, concerning judgment, concerning press, and so on, then it starts to get difficult to deal, you know. Your prime minister does things that for the most of the rest of the people are not really understandable. I mean, Hungary is one of the countries that gets most of the money from Europe. A lot of your economy wouldn't work anymore without the money from Europe. And nevertheless, what he does is all the time saying Europe makes everything bad. I mean, this is quite funny for people outside, you know. Even it was so sad, then we laugh about it. So this is a thing, and of course, you know, freedom of press, which starts to get down and down and down here in this country, is a real problem, I think, because then you go to the fundamentals of democracy, and then it starts really to get difficult. And that's why, of course, now the European Union reacts in economical way. They start not to give the money anymore to Hungary for different things, you know. And I mean, you have other problems, of course. And I think that should be discussed also in this country and in others. But discussing is, for me, is a good thing. Even if you discuss it in a hard way, that's quite a good thing. But undermining democracy is a real problem if you want to stay in the EU. That's my opinion.
And you share it. I will be translated by Ivan. D'abord, je crois qu'on est ici comme des poètes et que l'opinion de chacun de nous en tant qu'individu n'a pas grande importance. On n'a pas une compétence particulière sur l'Europe au motif qu'on est poète.
Well, I think we're here first and foremost as poets. We will have our own individual opinions, but they're not especially important. You know, we are not political specialists on Europe and the EU. We're here as writers. All right. Go on. All right. Very dangerous.
En France, l'Europe est, je crois, de façon générale, acceptée et défendue, mais avec des nuances par rapport à beaucoup de nos voisins. Je vous rappelle par exemple qu'en 2005, je crois, il y a eu un référendum sur un traité européen important, et que ce référendum a donné un non, c'est-à-dire que la population française, en majorité, s'est opposée à ce traité.
Right, there was a referendum in 2005, and it has been given a particular name, and was the majority opposed? Have I understood that right? They were opposed to the referendum.
No. There was a referendum, and at the end of the referendum, the French population said, no, we don't want of this particular treaty. Ce qui ne veut pas dire que les Français sont opposés à l'Europe. En majorité, en très grande majorité, les Français sont en faveur de l'Europe. Mais, en majorité aussi, je crois, pas de cette Europe. Et ce qui est visé là, c'est le fait que l'Europe qui a été construite depuis la dernière guerre, s'est construite sur des bases uniquement économiques, à travers l'union sur le charbon, l'acier, l'énergie, etc. Une union qui s'est accrue petit à petit, mais sur des bases exclusivement économiques d'abord.
So the French certainly aren't against the idea of Europe, on the contrary. However, they're not necessarily in favour of this particular version of Europe, which was founded on purely economic ideals. So it was a union for the trade in steel and coal, and it was economic in nature.
Ce qui a abouti à une situation où on a vu la Commission européenne décider de la taille des bananes, mais ne pas prendre en compte les aspects sociaux, par exemple, sur le salaire minimum ou sur toute une série d'éléments qui concernent la vie des gens. Et par ailleurs, en matière de démocratie, jusqu'à l'institution du Parlement européen, c'était une organisation totalement antidémocratique.
What's interesting is that there are things that have been overlooked. So famously, there's a great deal of scrutiny placed on the size of bananas, but not basic social requirements. There's no agreement on things like the minimum wage. These are things that are really fundamental to people's lives. And this is it's this aspect that's a lot more human and that is not only baldly economic and political that we're driving at here.
Alors, la situation évidemment évolue, plutôt dans le bon sens, mais c'est quelque chose quand même qui réclame de la part des populations européennes une grande surveillance. Je voudrais ajouter autre chose, c'est que l'Union européenne, ça ne veut pas dire l'uniformité.
Something we're going to have to watch very, very closely is that the idea of Europe does not require uniformity. What was the first? Could you repeat the first thing?
Yes, the first point was. The first point was that as Europe is evolving, but this evolution needs a particular survey by the population because it is not natural, it is done only under constraint. Alors, on en vient peut-être à partir de ce point de la diversité à quelque chose qui me touche moi en tant que poète, c'est-à-dire quelqu'un qui manipule les mots. Et là, je crois avoir une compétence. Aujourd'hui, nous avons dans l'Union européenne un seul membre dont la langue est l'anglais, c'est l'Irlande, qui doit représenter 1% de la population européenne. Or, à Bruxelles, la langue officielle pratiquement est l'anglais et il me semble que c'est une situation qui n'est pas normale et que l'on devrait, là c'est quelque chose de très personnel, choisir parmi les langues européennes 3 langues, une d'origine latine, une d'origine saxonne et une d'origine slave, et les imposer, enfin ou les utiliser de façon préférentielle parce qu'elles émanent des populations européennes.
And diversity is something that I really think about as a poet because I work with words. And what's interesting is that practically the official language of the European Commission is English, but there's only one English-speaking nation in the European Union now, that's Ireland, and it's a very small percentage of the total population. So I think instead we should choose one language of Germanic origin, one of Latin origin and one of Slavonic origin, and we should use them because they represent the linguistic heritage of Europe better.
Thank you, you are very good.
I hope I've managed to do justice to what you've said. Yes, in answer to your question, I don't think it's a shining beacon of unity or doing things brilliantly, but I'm a heck of a lot more optimistic than pessimistic. We need to stick together. You know, we're a bunch of relatively small countries with huge economic and political blocks around us. You know, we are far better working together than trying to work in isolation. Britain has left the EU, it has not left Europe. I will be voting in order to try to change this for the rest of my life, if it takes that long. And I think there's one thing that the European Union can be extremely proud of, and where it genuinely is a world leader, and that's climate change legislation. Getting a whole load of countries to pull together to tackle one problem that is simultaneously global and yet profoundly local and diverse in its manifestations is not easy, and they are succeeding a heck of a lot better than many other countries. So that's something that I'm really fascinated by and that I'm proud of, actually. They're doing that really well.
I'm not wearing a Ukrainian flag, but I must confess I am completely for Ukraine against Russia. We often say it's a war. It's actually an invasion. So it makes a big difference. Ukraine is fighting back, but it's an invasion. Saying that, I must confess that as a writer, I was very concerned at the beginning of the war because many Russians, actors, writers, singers, etc., were banned at Western countries just because they were Russians. I think that's something we must be aware of and not accept. You as an individual cannot be punished for what your country does. That's what I think.
It's your problem that you opened the floor. There were three major issues already discussed. Of course, the present most important tragedy here in Europe is the war in Ukraine. It's impossible to understand, to tell the truth. You mentioned the other problem, this stupid, bloody country, Hungary. Government is not the same like the people. I know. But it's terrible to survive, to live together with this terrible processes. You mentioned also the problem of integration of Europe. I raise another issue. Probably I will be not very sympathetic. We are in a synagogue now, and the Holocaust was already mentioned. Christianity was already mentioned. No question, nobody can question mark that the aggressive attacks against the Jews raise where the Muslim population is growing. It's an evidence. My question is, and of course the countries have different experience, that do you think that the Muslim inflow into Europe can be integrated into Europe? Because I had a lot of discussions with some French friends who said that, okay, be patient, it will happen. And it didn't happen. How do you see this problem? It is a cultural war, or it's only a minor issue?
En Europe, c'est sans doute un problème qui est concentré sur certains pays, dont la France, puisqu'on a une minorité d'origine, de culture musulmane. Et c'est un problème nouveau, parce que si l'on se reporte 30 ou 40 ans en arrière, c'est-à-dire à la génération qui précède celle d'aujourd'hui, il n'y avait pas ce problème n'existait pas. La génération des parents des jeunes islamistes d'aujourd'hui voulaient s'intégrer, n'étaient pas réellement croyants. Ils étaient... vous savez qu'en France, on a une loi qui sépare... Pardon.
There's been something of a generational shift. If you look at how things were happening in France 30 or 40 years ago, things were different. There is perhaps a greater element of radicalization now. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. En France, l'État est laïque, c'est-à-dire que toutes les religions sont considérées de la même façon et l'État ne prend pas parti.
The state is non-religious in France, and that means that all religions are considered equal, and the state does not take any sides.
Et cette idée de la laïcité, aujourd'hui, est un enjeu majeur en France, parce que il y a un certain nombre de jeunes issus des populations émigrées pendant pendant la guerre d'Algérie essentiellement, enfin, dans ces années 1960-1980, ces jeunes revendiquent leur religion comme une identité.
Things are shifting. There seem to be young people who are reclaiming their religion as an identity.
En France, la notion d'identité est quelque chose que nous regardons avec beaucoup de suspicion. Nous préférons mettre l'accent sur l'universalité, c'est-à-dire tous les hommes, et les femmes aussi, sont égaux, quelle que soit leur origine, quelle que soit leur religion, quelle que soit la couleur de leur peau, et l'État, par exemple, interdit des enquêtes dans lesquelles ces éléments apparaissent.
So what that secularity of the state means is that people are considered as equals. People of different religions and men and women are considered as equals, and that gives an element of uniformity.
Donc cette universalité, aujourd'hui, elle entre en conflit avec les jeunes musulmans qui, eux, réclament se réclament d'une certaine identité et ont réussi à l'imposer dans certaines régions, dans des quartiers, où, par exemple, une femme ne peut pas sortir sans un voile.
This idea of universality does come into tension with certain groups where, you know, this idea of identity is brought to the forefront. So there are certain districts where a woman can't go out without a veil over her face.
C'est quelque chose qui n'est pas accepté par la grande majorité de la population, et certains, à l'extrême droite, pensent qu'il faut expulser ces immigrés, ces personnes qui sont françaises, qu'il ne faut pas en accepter d'autres, et que de toute façon il est impossible de les assimiler, qu'ils deviennent français. Je crois le contraire, mais ça passe évidemment par une lutte politique.
What this means is that assimilation is difficult, and this becomes something of a political struggle. Some on the extreme right think that those who are French people, but who would wish to insist on this identity, should be deported. Others should also be refused. And this, of course, becomes a huge political debate. It's a source of political disagreement. Of course, Gérard is of the opinion that, yeah, of course people can integrate, but it is a source of discussion. Have I got it right?
Plus que de discussion, c'est une question de volonté politique.
It becomes a question of political will. There we go. Yeah, all right. It's interesting. I've lived in a Muslim country. I lived in one for 3 years. I tried to integrate as well as I could. I found it culturally very, very different. I think there are unique cases, and they are as unique as individuals. I think largely the British Muslim population is British. It's part of our culture, it's part of our heritage. We're quite happy with that, just as there are, you know, Buddhist communities and Jewish communities, and all sorts of other faiths and cultures, really. I'm aware that in cases of radicalisation, which a friend of mine researches, actually, you do get disaffected people. These are a tiny minority. These are individuals who will seek something in life. They will become dissatisfied. And actually, a weapon of radicalisation is giving people drugs. There is a link between drug abuse and radicalising young people. And a friend of mine has researched this. It's actually not terribly well known. So I think if you are a person who may even be vulnerable yourself. You could be preyed upon by these sinister ideologies, but they're seen as a vanishing minority in Britain. You know, there's an acceptance of a certain degree of difference and diversity that I hope we're managing with. We're not perfect, but I hope we're getting there in terms of, you know, long-standing issues that we have had in the past with racism.
I would like to turn to poetry, if it's possible.
It's obligatory.
Maybe to you, probably to you, the question, what about the title of this evening? We know the poetry, Európa csendes, újra csendes. What does it mean, Európa hangos, újra hangos?
This is a question our friend over there should answer, because he found it out.
This is a very famous poetry, Európa csendes, újra csendes.
Yeah, the idea came from Brody's text. But this Európa csendes, újra csendes, elmúltak forradalmai, this poem spoke about the oppression of the people after the mid-19th century revolutions. And the idea came that hopefully Europe will not fall down into this terrible situation. Ukraine is, according to my opinion, is only the start. If Ukraine will lose, Europe will lose. And I don't know, what about the other part of the world?
My guess that Ukraine will lose. Why? Why do you think?
No. That's why we need to do everything to help them to win.
Please don't use such words. No.
Okay, let's ask this. Who thinks that Europe is loud, and who thinks Europe is not loud? So who thinks Europe is loud? Loud. So it's noisy. It's not, there is much discussion going on, because this is the title is this. There is noise in Europe.
This is good or bad noise?
Oh, that's a good question. So,
for me, it's good. Yeah. No, we had discussions with three people.
Yes.
It's normal.
yeah, the question was if you think really there is noise. Okay.
Might be more.
Might be more.
To be loud is different than to be noisy.
Quiet noise.
Do you want the mic, Gabor?
I think to be noisy is just different than to be loud, because you can be there can be much noise in a like of chaos. We don't know what we are discussing about. We don't know what we are thinking when we say Europe. We have just completely different opinions, and we all have opinions, but we don't have statements with arguments. To be noisy is for me to have just opinions, but to be loud it could mean that we have statements and we have arguments about us. And it is for me just different. And I cannot hear much arguments in this chaotic European discussing. We have all politicians, poets, and so on. Every one of us, we have opinions, but just opinions which are regarded by propaganda, by newspapers, and so on. But to think on questions which, for example, I have maybe other questions than you, Guy, but these are questions, and which we have to think about them, and we have to say something about on that question, but arguments and not opinions, because opinions means for me to be noisy, just to be noisy, and our world is just very noisy on mass media and so on. Okay, what does it mean? Brings it us forward, or we are just sitting about not knowing about our future, what we will do together, and also mean that we have to see on our continent to the European Union from outside. We are a very tiny continent with several languages and several countries. Okay, but we have to do something together because we are surrounded by powers like China, like Russia, and we have just different interests than maybe in several points than the US. We have to do something together, and that would be our question, I think. What we will do together from Ireland up to Ukraine, and I'm completely agree that in that situation the war against Ukraine is the most major problem which you have to solve, of course. And I cannot see other solution than Putin has to lose. There is no other solution, but we have a lot to do together. If you see on the continent from outside, but I think statements and arguments are just more important than opinions.
Gabor.
I want to ask a question which is, I think, very divisive. When most of us speak of Europe and we think of diversity, we take democracy as a given. Democracy is the only way, and especially with the war against Russia, we talk about democracy versus despotism, but we don't actually ask the question whether are there any beasts within us. We just talk about other powers and the division between our cultures and our minorities, but actually, like most of ancient Greek philosophers opposed the idea of democracy, because what's the point of democracy letting people vote and choose our political ways if people aren't educated enough? And especially nowadays with social media and other technologies, public opinion and personal opinion can be altered through advertisements and our technologies, which we actually think, we think that they serve us, but they actually could potentially be against us. And there may be a much, much bigger beast lurking within than outside our borders.
I'd say that poetry is the contrary of noise. Poetry must focus on the choosing of the right words instead of such a huge number of words and reflected talking. So if a poet needs to choose from all the noises, words, thoughts, etc., he or she has to reflect and think deeply, just to fight the noise as a disturbance. And education has a very important role in that. I was thinking, when you mentioned noise, about what the romantic poet, the English romantic poet John Keats wrote. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. So a poet must suggest instead of giving a political speech.
Probably I didn't understand everything you spoke, and therefore I want to say that I guess there is only one is the biggest question in our world just now. This is a climate change, and the second is the second problem is mainly in Europe and so-called northern countries. It's Ukrainian-Russian war. And other things are not, in my mind, they are not problems, they are questions.
Yes. Time is up. If there is anyone who wants to ask any more questions, let's have one or two more.
Si j'ai bien compris, la question était à propos de la démocratie.
Yes. Go ahead.
Non, moi je me suis déjà exprimé. Je pense qu'effectivement aujourd'hui, l'Union européenne a beaucoup de progrès à faire en matière de démocratie. La Commission européenne décide seule, avec une surveillance lointaine des chefs d'État des différents pays, mais en réalité c'est elle qui décide, c'est elle qui choisit les agendas, les orientations. Il y a un Parlement européen, mais qui n'a virtuellement aucun pouvoir, et donc je ne crois pas qu'on puisse dire aujourd'hui que l'Union européenne soit une démocratie. Elle est composée de démocraties, chaque pays est une démocratie, plus ou moins, mais l'Union européenne, non.
The European Union itself is not a democracy, it's composed of democracies, but above that, there's a European Parliament that has very little power, and decisions are made by heads of state. So one of Gérard's points earlier actually was that there are processes that could be seen as anti-democratic. I hope I've captured that correctly.
That's of course right, but when I'm speaking of these so-called European values and democracy, then of course, I mean, as you said rightly, that it's composed by democracies, and of course the European Union, these yeah, it's just a mosaic of these countries, and therefore they have, of course, these values that they try to propagate, you know. And you're absolutely right that the Commission, for example, you can't vote that one. Yeah, that's absolutely right. But I wanted to say something to you. I don't know whether I got everything right or understood in a right manner. You were questioning democracy, right?
Yes, because like democracy, for example, is what let Brexit happen, and it is what's letting this government, Hungarian government, run for 12 years now.
Yeah, I think that democracy is a political form that enables people to take part in whatever you would call a state. It's a possibility to realize the idea of that the population is the state. If you start to break down democracy, then of course you will have very soon or immediately a lot of the population that has nothing to say anymore and is just ruled. And that the ancient philosopher were questioning democracy, of course. I mean, if you think of the way they were living, I mean, it were slave societies. You know, they had slaves and so on. So, of course, they were questioning this kind of democracy. But for me, of course, it's for the moment, as we don't know any better form, it's the best form to live in a state where you have democracy. I don't want to live in a state where I can't say what I'm thinking, where probably my books are not published because of what I'm saying, where I can't vote, and so on and so on. And of course, it's always a problem of education. Yeah, that's right. Because if you are not educated, and that is a link again also to the question you had at the beginning about the Muslim population. I think first of all, at least in Germany, if there is something about the Muslim population in the paper, it is because something bad happened. You never read about the integration, which is there. I have a lot of Muslim friends who, of course, are Germans, and I mean, they just have another religion. It's not a problem at all. But of course, you have those who make problems, of course. And that is very often the question of radicalization and a question of education.
Je voudrais ajouter quelque chose sur cette question de la démocratie en liaison avec la diffusion de l'information, ce qui est, je crois, la question. Si on se reporte à une situation d'il y a 40 ans, l'information était donnée exclusivement, en France au moins, par des journaux contrôlés par des grands financiers et par la radio, la télévision aux mains de l'État.
Gérard would like to respond to the point about information and how it's passed on. If we go back 40 years, the press in France consisted of newspapers that were owned by financiers, and the radio consisted of state broadcasts.
Aujourd'hui, ça n'a pas changé de ce point de vue, ce qui fait que, par exemple, les électeurs qui votent à gauche ne sont absolument pas représentés dans les journaux, dans la télévision, à la radio. La différence essentielle, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, on a des réseaux sociaux.
The big difference now is that we have social media, because people who are left-wing and would vote the left-in are not largely represented on the TV, on the radio, or in the papers.
Yes, not largely or not at all. Et ça, c'est une différence majeure, mais évidemment, ça a un inconvénient aussi, c'est que c'est un moyen de diffusion d'informations erronées, et ça suppose aussi une éducation particulière que malheureusement qui a malheureusement tendance à disparaître.
But what social media means is that it's possible to distribute fake news. And in order to spot fake news, you might need a level of education, which in Gérard's opinion is perhaps beginning to disappear. In my opinion, yes, what is quite interesting, I'll come back to your point, is that, yeah, new channels of communication can certainly be used to manipulate people, as the press could be used, you know, and is still used in some places. I think this question of how democracy could potentially be skewed from within through manipulation is a very, very interesting one. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but there was a huge investigation after Brexit of, guess who, possible Russian involvement in influencing people to vote for Brexit. Russia hates the European Union. They want to see us dismantled.
C'est très intéressant parce que, selon mes informations, les électeurs anglais, britanniques, pardon, ont voté en faveur du Brexit sur la base de fausses informations. Is that right?
Yes, some of it was, but then, you know, quite often we get political promises that people can't fulfill. Yeah, you got disinformation or a lack of information as well. So there was a rise in Google searches after the day of the referendum results saying, what is the European Union? Which is quite frightening. There was an uptick in the number of people who wanted Irish passports as well. So yes, I mean, they were given false information by the government on finance and statistics, but then, you know, the Scottish independence referendum estimated Scottish oil revenue, or rather Alex Salmond claimed Scottish oil revenue was 3 times the realistic figure that it would bring in. So people do massage the figures. You know, we've seen that before. Social media is a way of disseminating information like this, which is fake news.
Thank you, you are very good.
Let's have one last question. Yes, we want to hear you, Jutta.
I thought it quite interesting that Attila asked for the beast within. And of course, the democracy is the best system I know, and I wouldn't like to live in another system, of course. But we talked about manipulation, that was very important for me. So, and the other thing is inequality. The difference between the poor and the rich is growing each year. That's one point. And education is something that follows it. We have people who might be have a migration background, and they can't get as good education as others who have been for several generations in the country. That's very important. So we have to look for those who are weak and those who don't have much money, and that's a point where we can save a lot, I think, and manipulation might be not so easily done.
Yes, some of our poets have prepared with a poem, short ones, and I think we should end up with reading them. Okay. Who wants to start?
Thanks. Well, I read it in Spanish and then you in Hungarian. Shall I explain something or what?
If you want, yeah, please go ahead.
Well, the name of the poem is, in English, The Book of Kells. As you know, The Book of Kells is a manuscript shown in Trinity College, Dublin, It belongs to a tradition of illuminated manuscripts which were done in Ireland in the early Middle Ages. Libro de Kells. Apenas si cristiana esta belleza, labor de lacería, largas líneas cruzándose infinitas en la piel de un carnero muerto en el otoño. La mayúscula inmensa que muerden las panteras, serpientes que se enroscan a lo largo del asta, los trazos insulares, el hermoso alfabeto que nombra cada letra con el nombre de un árbol. Si no creo en tu Dios, viejo copista, creo en lo divino de tu arte.
Kelsey Kódex. Nem igazán keresztény ez a szépség. Küzdelmes kezek kalligráfiája, filigrán vonalak vargabetűi egy ősszel letaglózott borjú bőrén. Óriás iniciálét tépázó párducok, hosszú dárdavasán tekergőző kígyók, tipikus írvonások, egy ABC betűi, akác, bükk, cserszömörce, dió, eperfa, éger. Vén kódex másoló, nem hiszek Istenedben, de azt hiszem, a műved istené.
Well, I'm going to read you a poem that first appeared in an anthology called Bollocks to Brexit. I'm very, I've been asked to read this one, and I'm really looking forward to giving it an outing, actually. I hope I can find it. Here we go. So, my idea in this poem is that all the migrant birds are kicked out of Britain because they're seen as subversive elements. I have a Swiss grandmother. I have another nationality. So the idea of severing ties with Europe, or at least with the European Union, was very, very strange to me. So I will read you my anti-Brexit poem, Peregrines. We thought it was the catch of breath that forecasts heavy weather, something fretful in the leaves, the weathercocks in a spin. When nightingales cried, "Cheer up, Jug Jug," the grouse replied, "Go back." The hedgerows emptied quickly in a gale of fleeing wings. In the spring, a leaflet fluttered through each letterbox. Even the blackbirds in your garden came from Eastern Europe. Brent geese wheeled north, oaring the air for Svalbard. Fieldfares left their seafaring, turned-tailed for the fjords. The whole sky dark with them, a rain of down and droppings, a year with a silent summer, and our islands cast adrift. My grandmother's ashes stirred beneath a Sussex apple tree, restless for the crossing home to Chemin des Fauconniers. I could only name my estrangement in words with distant origins, and all that was peregrine in me quivered to take flight.
Vándorok. Azt hittük, csúfidő jön, lélegzet fönnakadt. Levél vészjóslón zizzent, pörgött a szélkakas. Fülemüle szólt, csicsadt, fűrj vágta rá, csak-csak. Csapkodó szárnyak viharában csupaszodott a sövény. Tavasszal minden levélládába belibbent egy levél. A kertedbe a fekete rigó is Kelet-Európából menekült. Az örvöslúd északra tartott a Spitzbergák felé, a fenyőrigók hagyták a tengert, hátuk mögött a fjordot. Sötét lett tőlük az ég, ürülék és tollpihe hullott. Csendes volt a nyár, sodródtak a brit szigetek. Nagyanyám hamvai mozdultak egy Sussexi almafa alatt. A Chemin de Fauconniers-re hazavágytak. Csak idegen szavakkal festhettem le, hogy idegen vagyok. Remegve elröppenni készült bennem a vándor.
Yeah.
If I can, one remark. I remember Guy asked about war, that my hope and not my hope, even though we haven't a war solution of this war, and our hope to become a part of a nuclear umbrella of NATO. But we don't believe in this. My poem, we haven't in UK tradition of commentary our poems, but for Hungarian auditory, that I don't remember a life without war, because for me it's 9 years, and war, Russian-Ukrainian war, started from my region, my city, and my cities under occupation. It's 9 years, and I wasn't at home 9 years too. And as many people, it's the general psychosomatic tension. I like this term very much. People can't to feel alive, to feel happiness, some joy, many normal things. And a little bit it's about this, and many journalists ask, what are you feeling now? I need to comment war? It's strange for me. Пам'ять стає сухою, як трава в саду літа. Повітряна тривога в більшості областей України. Я провертаю ключ у поламаному замку, і двері в минуле зачиняються. Простір десь там на сході, всередині мене, заростає бур'яном небезпеки, десь тут і ніде. Провалитися в терикон, улюблена лякалка з дитинства. Увага, всі в укриття. Що ви зараз відчуваєте, питаючи не в кожному інтерв'ю? Кригу, кріг, розочкою Донбасу, порізане горло, скло вкраденої молодості в руках і ногах, ці красиві метафори, криве дзеркало, літератури. Я не можу згадати, що відчуваю. Увага, відбій повітряної тривоги. І виношу себе за дужки.
I was a bit afraid that this was lost in translation. Látod?
Just one thing to add. To be loud means to be precise as well, and we translators tend to forget about translators. So Antonio's poem was translated by András Imre, Yvonne's poem was translated by me, Julia Lázár, and Ia's poem by Diana Vonnak, but I'm reading it as she's not here. Kiszárad az emlékezet, mint nyári kertben a növény. Légvédelmi riasztás Ukrajna minden megyéjében. Elfordítom a kulcsot a törött zárban, és a múltra nyíló ajtó becsukódik. Az a tér valahol keleten bennem van. Benőtte a veszély gyomja valahol itt és sehol. Beszakadni a meddőhányóba, legkedvesebb gyerekkori babánk, figyelem mindenki az óvóhelyre. Mi az, amit most érez? Kérdezik szinte minden interjúban. Kár, kríg, donbaszi rozsda tövisével felsértett torok. Az ellopott fiatalság üvegcserepe a kezemben, lábamban. Ezek a szép metaforák, az irodalom görbetükre. Képtelen vagyok emlékezni rá, hogy mit érzek. Figyelem, vége a légvédelmi riasztásnak. a zárójelekbe kapaszkodva húzom fel magam.
I think, Iya, you didn't mention the town you are from?
Donetsk.
Donetsk, yes.
Donetsk.
Donetsk.
Sorry.
Okay.
Donetsk.
No, Gerard.
Yes.
This is the type. The text is words without meaning, and the translation exists, but I don't understand why. But first, I'll read the original. Lombithur. Den pirimauttu verille sturita corneri, den Virisselom piru, virisselom virru, pirisselom pirru, kilisselom killu, vilisselom villu, sirussem sirru, tirusselom tirru. Punder 21, punder 22, punder 33, punder alla tonus, all sammelde, sambun krigivenes kreigonut, mellesta hette, anduelesta hette. Varast tulim kurbu mestollet munde, ja külge, dus mulle pinde. Va heter?
Yeah, as Jan said, there is a translation, but I don't think I'm going to read it. And my last question is to Jan: Is this poem a criticism of Europe, maybe?
As you like. Maybe. Maybe it's more or less a criticism about myself.
Thank you very much for coming, for everyone. Thank you for Oldi Ferry to let us speak here. Thank you for our poets to share their opinion about Europe and much other things. Thank you for Yvonne for translating Gerard, and thank you for Gerard for keeping the mic for Yvonne. And please, anybody wants a picture postcard, feel free to have.
And we will
Yes.
Yes.